Tonight, let the whispers of the desert wind guide you, bringing you directly to the heart of ancient Egypt, not in dusty textbooks, but right amidst the magnificent Pharaoh's palace, where secrets and conspiracies are woven under the shimmering candlelight. You won't just hear a story, you will live it. Feel every beat of its opulence and the ultimate fear within the brutal harem. Join us as we explore the life of a concubine, from the moment of innocent entry into that ruthless game, through the grueling process of optimizing body and mind, until you realize information is a deadly weapon. You will witness the anonymous men and women who operate the game, hear the whispers of rumors as a precious currency, and ultimately face the eternal loop of power and illusion. Each chapter is a raw, intense piece of truth, plunging you into situations as if you have known them, lived them before. Now turn off your lights, pull up your blanket, and immerse yourself in every word. Let the narration carry you deep into that world, where you are the central character. If you're listening from a bustling city or a quiet room late at night, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journeys. Thank you, and we wish you an impressive voyage. The sharp, metallic tang of fear sliced through the faint perfume of lilies as you awoke, not gently, but with the violent, disorienting jolt of a snare trap tightening around your soul. Your eyes, still heavy with the lingering ghosts of a simpler life in your sun-drenched village, strained against the overwhelming opulence that surrounded you. This was no longer the comforting mud-brick hovel of your youth, where the familiar scent of wood smoke clung to the air and the warm, rough earth embraced your bare feet. This was the harem, a gilded cage where every breath felt observed, every shadow held a chilling secret, and the very air, thick with unspoken anxieties, pressed down on you like an invisible, suffocating shroud. Your heart hammered against your ribs, a frantic, desperate drum against the crushing silence that seemed to swallow even your thoughts, leaving you utterly alone. The sheer, overwhelming scale of it all, the cold, polished perfection of the alabaster walls and the lofty, painted ceiling was a brutal physical blow. It was a sudden, irreversible realization that the sweet whispers of paradise, the promises of glory from the royal recruiters, were nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion, a cruel bait to lure you into this golden prison. Your old life, the one you knew, was gone, evaporated like dew in the merciless desert sun. This was merely a terrifying prologue, a forced entry into a game you had yet to comprehend, a game you were now irrevocably compelled to play. The morning sun, a harsh, unforgiving orb, began to peek through the high, narrow windows, its rays like judgmental fingers, cold and long, pointing out your new, insignificant place in this grand, terrifying tableau. A curt cough, dry as desert dust, sliced through the fragile quietude that had settled. A towering figure, a woman whose face seemed carved from ancient granite, her features unyielding and devoid of any warmth, was standing by your bed. Her eyes, like chips of obsidian, were cold and unblinking, reflecting nothing. She was the chief matron, a formidable veteran of these very palace walls, and her presence was a constant, chilling reminder of the impersonal forces that now governed your very existence, a cold certainty that left no room for sentiment or protest. "Awake, concubine," she commanded, her voice a low guttural rasp, utterly devoid of any human warmth, a sound that promised nothing but unquestioning, immediate obedience. "The day begins. Your journey here is not of leisure, but of exacting purpose. You are a vessel, a canvas, a product, and like any fine commodity intended for the highest echelon, you will be prepared." The word product echoed in the vast echoing chamber, not just in your ears, but deep within your mind, stripping away any last vestige of your former self, leaving behind a hollow space where your individuality once resided. You were no longer simply you, a girl with dreams and memories. You were an object, an investment, a piece in a larger, incomprehensible puzzle. You rose, your limbs stiff with a fear that had woven itself into your very bones, and stepped onto the cold, unforgiving stone floor, already feeling the subtle, irreversible shift of identity, a transformation beginning even before the sun fully climbed above the horizon. Your reflection in a nearby polished bronze, a pale, trembling shadow, seemed to confirm the unsettling metamorphosis. The bath, an ornate basin carved from luminous alabaster, massive and cold against your trembling fingers, was not a place of comfort, but of ritual, a chilling initiation into your new alien existence. Servants, moving with the silent, unsettling efficiency of automatons, poured pitchers of water. Not just water, but liquid infused with lotus petals, whose perfume, though sweet, felt alien, almost cloying in its suffocating intensity, pressing on your senses. It was a cleansing that stripped away not dirt, but identity. Each drop of scented water, a tiny blade severing your past, severing you from your own familiar self. They scrubbed you with rough linen, harder and more impersonal than your village mother's tender, calloused hands ever dared to, until your skin tingled with a raw, exposed vulnerability that shrieked louder than any physical pain, a sensation of being utterly laid bare. You closed your eyes, desperate for the distant memory of your mother's comforting touch, the warmth of her hand guiding you through simple chores in the familiar light of home, but found only the impersonal, unyielding grasp of those whose sole purpose was your transformation into something else entirely, a being meticulously stripped of all personal history. This daily ablution, seemingly a luxury beyond imagination, was merely the first brutal stage of what was to come, preparing your very essence, your very soul, as a blank canvas for the artistry of deception. The chief matron's voice, a low, steady drone from the corner of the vast, echoing room, pierced the silence, reciting a litany of desired attributes, as if listing ingredients in a potent, arcane potion. Skin like moonlight, so pale it could glow in the deepest tombs. Hair like raven's wings, so dark it swallowed the light. Eyes that capture the desert's depth, endless and inviting. Remember, concubine, you must look like you haven't aged in 12 hours, for every moment here, every flicker of an eyelash is a test. The water, once warm, now felt like glacial melt, seeping into your very marrow, chilling the last embers of defiance within you until they merely smoldered, threatening to extinguish completely, leaving only ash.
Next came the anointing, a meticulous, almost surgical application of perfumed oils and kohl. Your body, once your own, a simple vessel of childhood joys and aches, now belonged to the palace's rigorous regimen, an impersonal entity that saw only flaws to be corrected, features to be enhanced, a raw commodity to be refined. They painted your eyelids with a kohl so dark and precise it could be considered a military asset, a calculated weapon designed not just to pierce the soul of any who dared to look, but to conceal the raw, untamed fear lurking within your own. Each stroke was deliberate, a ritualistic obliteration of your former self, replaced by the idealized, unblemished image of a concubine, a mask that would soon feel more real, more inherent than your own original face. The scents, a heady, suffocating mix of myrrh, frankincense, and subtle spices, clung to your skin, seeping into every pore, transforming your very being into a fragrant prison. Your every cell seemed to absorb the essence of this forced perfection, a silent, terrifying promise to the unseen, omnipotent forces that governed your new fate, sealing your compliance. You sat utterly still, a mannequin yielding to the artist's brush, your mind numbed, drifting in a haze of fear and dawning resignation. This was not self-adornment, it was the meticulous preparation of a prize, a strategic deployment of beauty in the grand, terrifying game of the harem. The subtle gleam of the oils on your skin was not merely cosmetic, it was a sheen of polished desperation, a silent, agonizing scream for notice, a desperate, unspoken plea for survival in this new, bewildering world. The morning meal was not a meal at all, but a tableau of chilling splendor, a meticulously choreographed display of pretense and unseen tension. You sat among dozens of other women, each a shimmering presence in their finely pleated linen and dazzling jewels, their faces a gallery of carefully constructed expressions. The air hummed with an unsettling stillness, a tension so palpable it made the very dates and figs seem to shiver on their platters, betraying the calm surface. The laughter was light, like gossamer wings fluttering around a spider's web, but beneath it you sensed a hidden, unsettling current, a predatory whisper. Every glance from the other concubines, every whispered comment exchanged between older women felt charged with an unknown, dangerous meaning you couldn't begin to decipher. You watched, numb with a dawning horror, as a younger concubine, perhaps still clinging to some shred of innocence, smiled too widely at an older one, only to receive a return glance that was utterly devoid of warmth, a look that promised nothing but cold assessment, a silent calculation. This was a realm where smiles felt like masks, and polite murmurs carried an undercurrent of something sharp and dangerous, like the glint of a hidden blade. You felt like a small fish suddenly dropped into a vast, shimmering ocean teeming with unreadable predators, desperately trying to understand the treacherous currents without being swept away, without being swallowed whole. The unfamiliar scents of exotic foods, rich and strange, the delicate clinking of gold platters, the soft rustle of expensive fabrics, all blended into a disorienting symphony of opulent beauty and veiled unease, a constant assault on your senses. Then the shadow fell, heavy and absolute, chilling the very marrow in your bones. A hush, sudden and complete, swept through the vast hall, silencing every rustle of fabric, every delicate clink of jewelry, as if a great hand had pressed down on the world. Heads bowed, eyes lowered, as the great royal wife, the queen, entered,
a living statue carved from ancient granite and unyielding authority. Her presence was a physical force, pressing the air from your lungs, stealing the very breath from your chest. She moved with an almost chilling grace, her finely pleated linen robes shimmering like liquid moonlight, her heavy gold jewelry glinting like captured sunlight, each piece a testament to her unassailable position, her absolute power. Her gaze swept over the assembled concubines, 1,000 years of royal blood in her eyes, each glance a silent judgment, a cold declaration of supreme power that seemed to promise both potential favor and swift, absolute annihilation. You felt her eyes linger on you for a fraction of a second, an eternity that froze your blood, making your skin prickle with a mixture of terror and an unwelcome, morbid fascination. It wasn't an angry look, but one of profound, almost weary understanding, as if she could see every desperate hope, every tiny foolish ambition stirring within your heart, and found it both pathetic and utterly predictable, a cruel cycle she herself had undoubtedly endured and perhaps mastered. She was the undisputed presence in this particular game, the quiet enforcer of its unwritten, brutal rules, and her very existence was a constant, chilling reminder of what could be won through sheer, ruthless will and what could be lost in a fleeting heartbeat. Her smile, when it finally came, was a razor's edge, thin and polite, yet it carried the unspoken weight of 1,000 veiled threats, a subtle warning woven into its very fabric. Every gesture, every slight inclination of her crowned head was a subtle, terrifying demonstration of the unyielding grip she held over this gilded cage, a living embodiment of the game's brutal, beautiful reality. Her power was so immense, so profound, it seemed to absorb the very light around her, leaving only a lingering chill in her wake. You, a fresh piece on her grand chessboard, felt utterly insignificant, a mere dust mote in the vast, imposing shadow she cast. The days that followed blurred into a continuous flow of lessons, each one a step further into this new, strange existence. You learned to hold your back ramrod straight, to glide across marble floors as if floating on air, to angle your head just so when speaking. Your body, once free, became a tool, constantly refined. Your muscles ached with an unfamiliar soreness, a constant reminder of the physical discipline required, a silent scream of defiance from your unyielding frame. You were taught how to listen with your eyes, how to convey reverence without true humility, how to manage the layers of fine linen and the weight of elaborate wigs without a single falter. It was a relentless schooling in artifice. Sometimes your mind would snatch brief, painful glimpses of your old life, the easy laughter by the Nile, the rough, comforting texture of woven reeds, the simple taste of barley bread, only for the matron's sharp voice to cut through the reverie, pulling you back to the stark reality of your present. These fragments of memory, like shattered pottery, served only to underscore the profound loss, the chasm that had opened between who you were and who you were becoming. Each meticulous lesson, each perfectly executed pose deepened the chasm, pushing you further from the girl you once were.
As dusk painted the western sky with vibrant hues of ochre and rose, signaling the close of another arduous day, the day's forced performance drew to a close. A profound exhaustion settled deep within your bones, a heavy, crushing cloak,
after hours of forced smiles and effortless grace, of constant, unyielding vigilance. You retreated to your chambers, the lingering, cloying scent of incense, ambition, and an unfamiliar dread clinging to your skin like an unwelcome shroud, impossible to wash away. The profound silence of your room was a stark contrast to the cacophony of ambition that had echoed through the day's waking hours, a fragile, temporary haven, though even here the walls seemed to breathe with unspoken truths and unseen gazes. You looked at your reflection in the polished bronze mirror, seeing not just your familiar face, but the subtle, unmistakable changes wrought by the relentless pressure of the palace. The softness of your youth had begun to harden, replaced with a new, almost brittle resilience, and your eyes, once wide with simple wonder, now held a new, knowing, almost wary glint, reflecting the shadows within. You had survived another day. You had played your part, however small, however forced. As you drifted into the uneasy realm of sleep, the dreams came, fragmented and distorted, sometimes of impossible freedom, of open skies and windswept deserts, of familiar faces and comforting voices from a life you'd lost. But often the dreams were of the palace itself, of endless labyrinthine corridors, of the pharaoh's distant, elusive shadow, of the queen's knowing, piercing eyes that seemed to follow you even into slumber. You stirred, sensing not just the end of this day, but the relentless, inevitable approach of the next, a dawning realization that the new morning would bring only the repetition of the same unending game. The scent of fear was your constant companion, even in slumber, a grim reminder that this was merely the beginning of a long, arduous journey with no clear end in sight.
The air in the grand reception hall crackled with an electricity so potent it felt as though the very oxygen had been thinned, replaced by a raw, suffocating tension. It was the kind of stillness that precedes a cataclysm, a moment stretched taut like a bowstring before an arrow is loosed. You stood among dozens of other concubines, an intricate tapestry of silk and jewels, each woman an exquisite, fragile doll held captive by the shared, unspoken terror. No one dared to shift. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The soft rustle of your fine linen robes, a sound that usually whispered luxury, now felt like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. Your heart, a trapped bird, hammered against your ribs, its frantic rhythm the only sound you could truly hear above the ringing in your ears. The space was permeated by a hushed reverence, the gentle footsteps of unseen attendants echoing like distant drums, amplifying the suffocating stillness. Every eye, save for your own, was fixed straight ahead, unblinking, unmoving, as if carved from the very alabaster that formed the hall's majestic columns. A single, misplaced whisper, a nervous cough, felt like it could unleash a storm of unimaginable retribution. You swallowed, your throat dry as the desert floor, recognizing the absolute, terrifying power that could command such unwavering, fear-fueled obedience. Between the shimmering silks and gleaming gold, you began to discern the complex nuances of despair. Some, like you, were fresh blossoms, the youthful faces still betraying raw, unmasked terror. eyes wide and brimming with unspoken pleas. Yet others bore the hardened countenances of seasoned veterans. Their smiles were plastered on, their gazes meticulously trained, but in the tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of a hand clutching a fan, or the near-invisible clenching of a jaw, you saw the invisible scars of countless battles fought within this gilded cage. An older woman, her skin like parchment etched with forgotten stories, caught your eye. Her obsidian-black gaze, though impeccably schooled, held a fleeting, ancient flicker, a deep, weary understanding that sent a shiver down your spine. She offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a silent warning, a shared acknowledgement of the terrifying truth of this realm. Then she appeared, not with a fanfare of trumpets or a grand procession of attendants, but with a silent, almost ethereal grace that seemed to draw the very light from the opulent chamber. One moment the entryway was empty, the next she was simply there, a force of nature materialized. Her entrance was a grand unveiling without a single flourish, a profound presence that caused the entire room to sink into a reverent, suffocating quiet. The opulent chamber, with its intricate wall paintings and gleaming gold accents, seemed to dim around her, as if the very light dared not outshine her. It was a subtle, terrifying phenomenon, her presence absorbing the grandeur rather than being illuminated by it. Her attire, rich, finely pleated linen shimmering with gold thread, and the heavy, intricate collar of precious stones around her neck did not make her appear merely radiant. Instead, she made her seem like an ancient deity, a living statue carved from primordial power and unfathomable secrets. Her very form radiated an authority so absolute, so primal, that it transcended mere royalty. She was the embodiment of the kingdom's unwavering foundation, an unassailable bastion of power and distance. Every detail of her appearance, from the perfectly symmetrical braids of her dark wig to the subtle, almost imperceptible tilt of her chin, spoke of centuries of unbroken lineage, of a destiny intertwined with the very flow of the Nile, ancient and relentless. The very air molecules around her seemed to vibrate at a different frequency, a low hum not in your ears, but deep within your bones. Her robes, designed to billow with every subtle current of air, did not move with the rustle of fabric, but with the whispering glide of history itself. When she finally took her place, the light did not merely dim around her, it was absorbed by her, as though her entire being was a dark star, drawing in all illumination, leaving behind only the cold, polished gleam of power in her wake.
As she moved, gliding effortlessly across the polished stone floor, her presence was not just seen, but felt, like a chilling breeze sweeping through the hall. Her gaze, when it finally lifted, was not merely an inspection. It was an omnipresent force, sweeping across each concubine, each gilded ornament, with a meticulous, almost surgical precision. You felt her eyes touch you, a cold, alien sensation that prickled your skin, stripping away layers of carefully constructed composure. It was as though her gaze possessed the ability to peer into the very depths of your soul, illuminating every fleeting thought, every hidden fear, every tremor of weakness you desperately tried to conceal. It was not the curious, probing look of someone trying to understand. It was the chilling gaze of one who had already understood everything, long ago. A gaze that had seen through 1,000 facades, and now nothing could ever be hidden from her. Your past, your dreams, your desperate longing for freedom, all felt laid bare under her silent, dissecting scrutiny. In her gaze, you saw the echo of every triumph and every shattered dream that had ever passed through these halls. Every subtle movement, every almost imperceptible gesture she made, radiated an overwhelming, silent authority. It was not expressed through booming commands or brand pronouncements, but through an exquisite, chilling control over her own being. Perhaps it was the almost imperceptible arch of a perfectly painted eyebrow, or the delicate, deliberate way she might adjust a shimmering bracelet on her wrist. Or perhaps it was simply the slow, precise manner in which she finally settled onto her ornate, golden throne, her hand resting with effortless weight upon its carved armrest, a gesture of ownership. These were not mere actions, they were pronouncements, imbued with a power so immense they caused an almost imperceptible tremor to ripple through the room. Each seemingly trivial gesture carried the unspoken weight of 1,000 judgments, enough to make the strongest hearts falter, the most resilient souls tremble. Her command over her own body, every muscle controlled, every movement refined to an absolute minimum, was a terrifying reflection of the control she held over everyone else, a living demonstration of power. Her very presence, cold and unyielding, was the law. No decree needed to be etched in stone, no edict needed to be proclaimed by trumpets. You felt, with a dawning and sickening certainty, the vast, intricate system of unwritten rules that governed every breath within these gilded walls. A silent, pervasive network of power, with her, the great royal wife, at its absolute, unyielding center. Every polished surface, every perfectly aligned servant, every exquisitely presented dish, every single concubine's posture, from the smallest curl of their toes to the most delicate tilt of their chin, screamed of her absolute, unforgiving control. The meticulously maintained perfection of the harem was not born of mere aesthetic choice. It was a reflection of her iron will, a testament to her ruthless demand for absolute order. This flawless facade, an intricate dance of obedience, was a direct projection of her unseen hand, guiding every movement, dictating every breath. You understood then that she was not just a figurehead. She was the living, breathing heart of this immense, ancient machine, every pulse of its rhythm a testament to her power. Each gleaming surface became a mirror reflecting your own anxious vigilance. You instinctively corrected your posture, smoothed a phantom wrinkle on your robe, even subtly adjusted the angle of your head, not because a handmaiden commanded it, but because the very air, imbued with her silent authority, demanded it. It was a ballet of perfection, where the slightest deviation from the prescribed ideal felt like a shout, an act of defiant rebellion. You observed the other women, noting their perfect stillness, their empty, practiced smiles, and understood. This was not about pleasing the Pharaoh, not yet. This was about surviving under her reign, about mastering the intricate dance of submission, where the tiniest misstep could jeopardize not just your standing, but your very existence within these walls. A distinct scent, rich and complex, drifted from her, filling the air around her, a constant, pervasive reminder of her presence. It was not merely a perfume, though it was certainly rare and exquisitely blended, perhaps with notes of exotic lotus and sweet desert blooms. But beneath that, there was the deep, resinous scent of frankincense and myrrh, ancient and sacred, clinging to her like a second skin. This fragrance of power was not just pleasant, it was cool and imperious, carrying with it an almost palpable sense of distance and untouchable authority. It marked her, set her apart, creating an invisible barrier between her and everyone else in the room. It was the scent of temples and ceremonies, of ancient rituals and divine kingship, signifying her connection not just to the earth, but to the very heavens. It was a smell that commanded reverence, yet also instilled a profound sense of foreboding, a silent warning of the dangerous air you now breathed. The air molecules themselves seemed to shift and align themselves to her will, carrying her subtle, pervasive aura to every corner of the hall. It lingered in the air long after she had moved, a chilling, spreading mist that enveloped you, stripping the sweetness from the lotus-scented air, replacing it with the heavy, unyielding scent of destiny and divine rule. She finally sat upon her throne, a golden monument to her lineage, yet the air in the room remained taut, a single, impossibly stretched thread. Her silence, deeper and more profound than any spoken word, was not an absence of sound, but the menacing quiet of a predator observing its prey, every calculation unfolding in the stillness. Her eyes, unblinking, scanned the room, lingering here then there, on a face, a gesture, a tremor you hadn't even noticed. This was the stillness of a hunter before the strike, every nerve attuned, every possibility weighed. You felt exposed, vulnerable, as if every flaw, every desperate hope was being meticulously catalogued in her discerning mind. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a language of unspoken threats and absolute control, far more terrifying than any shouted command. The sheer force of her unmoving presence was a testament to her mastery of the environment, a terrifying exhibition of her absolute dominance. Her ancient, knowing gaze seemed to snag on your own, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than on any other, a cold, dissecting glance that felt like a direct challenge. You held your breath, fighting a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor threatening to betray you. And then a nearly invisible twitch at the corner of her lips. Was it satisfaction or something far more chilling?
You began to notice it then, a subtle tremor, a deeper bow, a quick, almost imperceptible avoidance of her gaze among the concubines who had been here longer. Their faces, though meticulously schooled to impassivity, held fleeting flickers of raw, naked fear. These older women, veterans of the harem's treacherous currents, displayed a terror that was palpable, a chilling echo of countless battles fought and lost within these very walls. Their exaggerated deference, their almost desperate stillness, spoke volumes of the stakes involved, a silent warning that resonated deep within your very bones. This was no longer just about beauty or favor. This was about survival, about navigating a game where missteps could lead not just to disgrace, but to a terrifying, permanent silence. The fear you witnessed in their eyes, a shared, silent agony, began to spread through you, a cold, creeping vine. You suddenly understood, with a sickening clarity, that this was a game where failure could indeed demand the ultimate price, where your very life was a pawn on her vast, intricate board. A chilling realization began to dawn, a glimpse into the Queen's own formidable past. You looked at her, and in the resolute set of her jaw, in the ancient wisdom etched around her eyes, a terrifying truth ignited within you. She, too, had once stood exactly where you were standing, a concubine among countless others. This throne, this golden monument, was also a sepulchre of forgotten dreams. She had clawed her way to this apex, each agonizing step perhaps crushing others beneath her gilded heel, perhaps sacrificing pieces of her own soul along the arduous path. Her power was absolute, yet it seemed to cocoon her in a cold isolation, a chilling solitude born of unrivaled victory. You wondered, briefly, if she too had ever looked upon a trembling, youthful woman like yourself and seen the stark reflection of her past self. A shiver, colder than fear, traced a path down your spine. Her triumph was a chilling prophecy of the cost of survival in this unforgiving game. Finally, as imperceptibly as she had arrived, she rose and departed. Her form vanished beyond the ornate doorway, but even after her form vanished, the hall remained steeped in her formidable presence. The air still felt thinner, colder, charged with the lingering residue of her authority. Her gaze, though no longer physically present, seemed to haunt the very space, a chilling phantom limb of her power, forever imprinted on the very air. Her unique, imperious scent, that blend of precious oils and ancient resins, lingered, an invisible shroud that enveloped everything, clinging to the hall's heavy tapestries, to your robes, to your very skin, a powerful, pervasive mark. It was a palpable reminder that even unseen, she was everywhere, her influence an inescapable veil. And the profound silence she had commanded, the silence of a predator, remained, a heavy, oppressive blanket that seemed to absorb all other sound. You realized then, with a terrifying clarity that settled deep within your marrow, that she was not merely a woman, not simply a queen. She was a living system of power, a fundamental, unyielding force, and you had just stepped, irrevocably, into her meticulously constructed world, a realm where the unwritten rules were far more ancient, far more brutal, than any law etched into stone. Her shadow, cast by an unseen sun, would define every step of your perilous journey within these walls, an ever-present, suffocating truth. The very air in your opulent chamber seemed to hum with a fragile, almost desperate energy, as the first sliver of dawn, pale as a pearl, pierced through the narrow, high windows. It wasn't just the promise of a new day that ignited this quiet fervor. It was the unspoken yet universally understood potential that this day, this specific day, might be different. Your heart, a persistent, foolish thing, thumped a tiny rhythm of anticipation against your ribs, a counterpoint to the distant, rhythmic clang of the palace bells, signaling the hour of waking. Despite the brutal lessons learned, the harsh stripping of your former self,
A stubborn ember of illusion still glowed within you, stubbornly refusing to be extinguished by the cold winds of reality. Each sunrise was a fresh canvas, a brand new opportunity, a silent whisper of hope that today, finally, your meticulously crafted existence might intersect with the divine gaze of Pharaoh. It was a shared delusion, palpable in the hushed movements of the other concubines, a collective yearning that shimmered like heat haze over the desert, fragile yet persistent. You knew intellectually the brutal odds, the crushing disappointments that had become a daily ritual, yet the heart stubbornly clung to its own illogical desires, dreaming of a touch, a glance, a recognition that would shatter the golden bars of this cage and perhaps redefine your very purpose. The morning rituals, once a shocking immersion into dehumanization, had now become a meticulously choreographed ballet, performed with the chilling precision of ancient temple rites. Hour after hour you yielded to the skilled hands of the maidens, each movement a practiced stroke in the creation of a living masterpiece. They arrayed you in shimmering linen, so fine it felt like woven moonlight against your skin, its pleats arranged with architectural precision. Jewels, heavy with the weight of both gold and expectation, adorned your neck and wrists, each facet winking with a borrowed light, designed not for personal adornment, but to catch and refract the fleeting attention of one man. Your hair, dressed with elaborate precision, became a towering testament to artifice, adorned with golden trinkets that whispered of your status, of your readiness. Every gesture, every slight tilt of your head, practiced before a polished bronze mirror, was calculated, perfected, for a singular, monumental purpose: to attract the divine, elusive gaze of Pharaoh. This wasn't merely preparation, it was an obsession made manifest, a desperate sculpting of the self into an idealized, unnatural perfection, a silent plea for recognition. You were a living sacrifice on the altar of his potential approval, your body and spirit honed into a weapon of fleeting beauty. The forced smiles you practiced, the ones that never quite reached your eyes, were like fragile masks, concealing the raw, aching void within, a void born of endless waiting and unfulfilled longing. The air in your private chambers, and indeed throughout the entire harem, was perpetually scented with exotic perfumes and rare anointing oils. These were not simply fragrances, they were liquid prayers, meticulously blended concoctions designed to allure, to enchant, to ensnare. The heady sweetness of lotus mingled with the deeper, more complex notes of myrrh and frankincense, creating an atmosphere that was both intoxicating and subtly suffocating. This seductive and fragile scent clung to your skin, seeped into your robes, becoming an extension of your perfected facade. It was meant to entice, to weave a spell, but beneath its alluring surface, you felt it also served a darker purpose: to mask the raw fear, the crushing emptiness that gnawed at you and every other woman in these gilded halls. It was the scent of longing, of unspoken dreams, clinging to the air like a delicate, shimmering veil, beautiful, yet incredibly vulnerable, much like the very hopes that sustained you all. Each breath you took was infused with this perfumed tension, a constant reminder of the fragile tightrope you walked, where allure was currency and desperation the underlying truth. The long corridors of the harem, usually bustling with the quiet industry of servants, transformed into an immense echoing chamber of endless waiting. You and the other concubines, arranged in precise, almost agonizingly straight lines, stood in a collective tableau of strained anticipation. Time stretched, thin and brittle, until each passing second felt like an hour, each minute an eternity. The distant rhythmic tick-tock of a colossal water clock, somewhere deep within the palace walls, echoed in the vast silence, each drop falling like a slow, deliberate drop of ice on your exposed soul. Or perhaps it was merely the frantic thump of your own heart, amplified in the suffocating stillness, a drumbeat counting down to an unknown fate. The other concubines, usually a source of veiled rivalry, were now united in this shared, excruciating vigil, their stillness absolute, their gazes fixed forward. It was as if you were all moths drawn inexorably to a sacred, unseen flame, waiting for the merest flicker of its presence, knowing that a single wrong move could mean incineration. The air hung heavy, thick with the unvoiced prayers and desperate yearnings of dozens of women, each a fragile vessel of hope, standing on the precipice of another potential disappointment. You watched the other concubines, their meticulously sculpted faces a study in subtle anxieties. In their eyes you saw a complex tapestry of desire, a simmering cauldron of unspoken emotions. There was the sharp glint of eager yearning, a competitive fire that burned fiercely beneath their placid exteriors, each woman a rival for the impossible prize. But you also saw the insidious brine of envy, a fleeting shadow when a more favored concubine received a subtle nod from a passing handmaiden, or when her perfume seemed to catch the light more brilliantly. Yet beneath the thinly veiled animosity, you also recognized a shared vulnerability, a profound sense of despair that mirrored your own. Each woman, a polished jewel in this terrifying collection, was also a stark reflection of your own fragility, your own burning, desperate need for validation. Their eyes were mirrors, reflecting back your deepest fears and your most illogical hopes, each a reminder that you were both player and pawn in this cruel, endless game. They were beautiful, formidable, yet ultimately as trapped as you were within these gilded walls. Then came the moment, or the lack thereof. Sometimes it was a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the palace's energy, a collective intake of breath from the assembled women. Perhaps a distant door would open, releasing a fleeting glimpse of a tall, imposing figure, a fleeting appearance vanishing around a corner before you could fully grasp it. Or a faint echoing voice, deep and resonant, would carry on the air, only to fade into the vast silence, leaving behind mere conjecture. More often, however, there was nothing at all, just the agonizing passage of time, the slow, agonizing realization that the hour had come and gone, and he would not grace this particular space with his presence. Even when he did appear, a majestic figure drifting through the periphery of your existence, his gaze never seemed to settle, never seemed to see anyone. His eyes, fixed on some distant regal horizon, slid past you all as if you were mere shadows, insubstantial phantoms in his vast, important world. He was an illusion, a phantom promise, his presence both overwhelming and utterly absent, a godlike entity forever beyond reach, eternally unknowing. The very air vibrated with his power, yet he remained perpetually distant, forever veiled. After each agonizing vigil, each meticulous preparation that culminated in an anticlimax, a pervasive sense of repeated disappointment would settle over the harem like a thick, suffocating shroud. It wasn't the cathartic release of tears or a sudden burst of anger. It was a slow, insidious erosion of the soul. Each evening, as the lamps cast long, mournful shadows across the polished floors, you felt a new layer of emptiness solidify within you, a hollow space growing with each unfulfilled hope. It was a dull ache, a profound sense of futility that seemed to seep into your very bones, leaving behind a profound spiritual fatigue. This wasn't mere sadness. It was the steady accumulation of scars on your spirit, a hardening, a callousing of the heart that grew thicker with each hopeful dawn and every desolate dusk. The relentless cycle of expectation and crushing defeat became a cruel rhythm, a psychological torment designed to wear away at your essence, leaving you hollowed out, perfectly compliant, perfectly empty. You saw it in the distant, resigned eyes of the older concubines, a silent testament to years, perhaps decades, of the same unending cycle. Whispers, like currents of air, constantly flowed through the harem, carrying tantalizing fragments of information about the elusive ruler. These were the rumors of Pharaoh, fragments of truth interwoven with threads of desperate fantasy. You heard tales of his favorite colors, the types of music that pleased him, the subtle shifts in his mood, the concubines he had briefly favored, only to discard. Each rumor, no matter how flimsy, no matter how contradictory, was clutched onto like a precious gem, a tiny flicker of hope in the pervasive darkness. They were fragile beacons, lighting the path for your desperate ambition, spurring you and the other concubines to greater lengths of perfection, to more agonizing self-denial. These weren't factual reports from royal scribes. They were narratives born of desperate yearning, meticulously woven tapestries of speculation and longing. You knew instinctively that most were fabrications, whispers designed to keep the game in motion, to fuel the endless ambition that coursed through the harem's veins, a secret buried deep beneath the sands of time, yet still potent. Pharaoh was not merely a king. He was a living god, a divine being whose presence sanctified the very land of Egypt. His remote, almost inaccessible nature was not born of indifference or cruelty, but of the immense, crushing burden of his divine crown and his sacred, solitary position. He was the sun, the Nile, the very breath of Egypt, and such a cosmic responsibility demanded a distance that mere mortals could not comprehend. He was a living God, a monumental presence whose very existence was a paradox of supreme power and profound, unbridgeable solitude. This understanding, gleaned from scattered teachings and the deep silent reverence of the palace, offered a sliver of tragic empathy. He was the object of desire for hundreds, yet perhaps the loneliest soul in the entire kingdom, trapped by the weight of his own divinity. The paradox of his existence highlighted the inherent isolation of both the one who craved his attention and the one eternally craved, a vast echoing void for them both.
As night draped its velvet cloak over the palace, bringing a temporary respite from the day's relentless performance, you lay on your silken mattress, the darkness offering no true escape. The dreams and obsession of Pharaoh continued to haunt you, playing out in endless loops in your mind's eye. Images of the morning's painstaking preparations, the endless hours of waiting, the fleeting glimpse of his silhouette, the crushing wave of disappointment, they all replayed an agonizing internal ritual. Sometimes you would drift into a fragmented dream of his fleeting favor, his eyes lingering on you, a touch, a whisper, only for the image to shatter, replaced by the cold, hard reality of your gilded prison. Pharaoh became more than a king. He was an inescapable obsession, an elusive goal that haunted your every waking moment and invaded your deepest slumber. He was the shimmering mirage in the desert of your existence, a prize forever just beyond your grasp, forever receding. You were trapped in this golden cage, not by physical chains, but by the relentless, unyielding pursuit of a phantom, a living nightmare from which there seemed no escape.
The grand dining hall, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through high alabaster windows, seemed, at first glance, to be an oasis of false serenity. Exquisite bowls crafted from polished granite held a bounty of dates and figs, glistening with honey. Platters of freshly baked bread, still warm from the ovens, released a comforting earthy aroma, mingling with the sweet, elusive scent of lilies from strategically placed vases. The gentle murmur of whispered conversations, like the distant rustle of a silk fan, created an illusion of ease, of civilized tranquility. Yet beneath this meticulously crafted facade, an invisible current of tension hummed, as palpable as the desert heat. Your senses, sharpened by the brutal lessons of the past days, screamed a silent warning. This wasn't peace. This was a battleground disguised as a feast, where every gesture, every breath, every seemingly innocuous word was a calculated move in a deadly game. Your heart, a frantic hummingbird, fluttered against your ribs, anticipating the subtle shifts in this dangerous atmosphere, knowing that beneath the surface a silent war was already underway, a brutal contest for survival and fleeting favor in the Pharaoh's shadowed court. One by one they entered, the players of this morning ritual, each a meticulously sculpted figure of grace and calculated charm. They varied wildly in age, from fresh, wide-eyed recruits like yourself, whose fear was still too raw to fully mask, to women whose eyes held the cold, weary wisdom of decades spent navigating these treacherous currents. Their robes, though all of the finest linen, were chosen with deliberate intent, some subtly alluring, others radiating an understated power. Jewels from simple carnelian beads to elaborate gold pectorals glittered like frozen tears, but it was their eyes that held the true narrative. Eyes that, despite the practiced softness of their smiles, remained sharp, assessing, constantly calculating. As they took their places, the air thickened, each new arrival adding another layer to the invisible web of rivalries. You felt the unspoken weight of their ambitions, a suffocating pressure that amplified the hall's already stifling atmosphere. Each woman a formidable opponent on this gilded chessboard. The very arrangement of the seating was a silent, eloquent language of power. Your eyes, now meticulously trained to observe, quickly scanned the long, low tables. Closest to the queen's raised dais, where her empty throne sat in cold majesty, were the most senior concubines, their expressions a blend of practiced deference and subtle, unyielding authority. Their positions were not accidental. They were hard-won battle scars, a testament to years of ruthless maneuvering. Further down the tables, where the light from the windows seemed to dim, were the younger, less established women, those still learning the cruel rhythms of this life. You, a fresh arrival, found yourself relegated to the periphery, a forgotten corner where you could observe the unfolding drama without being directly in its path. This subtle hierarchy, revealed by the simple arrangement of cushions and platters, was a silent map of power, a stark reminder of your own precarious, insignificant position in this vast, dangerous structure. From your secluded vantage point, you were an unseen observer, forced to absorb the unwritten rules of this elaborate dance. The conversations that drifted across the tables were a masterclass in poisoned compliments. A seemingly innocuous inquiry about the quality of a new perfume could carry the biting edge of a challenge to another's taste, or a subtle probe into their most recent gifts. A sweet, lilting praise for a concubine's exquisite new bracelet could in fact be a thinly veiled accusation about her desperate attempts to gain favor. Your ears, now attuned to the subtle cadences of palace intrigue, began to discern the hidden barbs, the veiled threats lurking beneath the surface of outwardly charming exchanges. You observed the fleeting smiles that never quite reached the eyes, the rapid, almost imperceptible glances exchanged between women, laden with unspoken calculations and simmering resentments. It was a theatrical performance of civility, where every word was a potential weapon, every polite nod a silent thrust in a duel of veiled intentions. The air was thick with double meanings, a web of honeyed words designed to ensnare.
But it was in the eyes that the true battles were fought, a silent, relentless war of wills. A concubine, perhaps boasting a new, elaborate coiffure, would be met with eyes sharp as knives, a quick, head-to-toe assessment from a rival that stripped away her pretense, leaving her exposed. Another, recounting a mundane anecdote, would be met with a subtle sneer, a barely perceptible curl of the lip from an older, more cynical woman, a silent judgment that spoke volumes. You saw the sudden flicker of triumph in one woman's gaze when another stumbled over a word, or the chilling satisfaction when a seemingly perfect posture momentarily faltered. You learned with a terrifying speed that in the harem a single deliberate glance could cut deeper than any blade, dissecting reputations, igniting rivalries, and exposing vulnerabilities with chilling precision. It was a language spoken in the silent, burning intensity of a gaze, a chilling currency of power. A ripple of unexpected kindness caught your attention. A concubine, her face softer than most, with eyes that held a hint of genuine warmth, approached your secluded table. Her name, you vaguely recalled, was Nefer. She offered a gentle smile, a simple, unsolicited compliment on the rare bloom tucked into your hair. She offered advice, shared a small personal anecdote about the Queen's preference for certain oils. Was she an ally or a tactic? Your heart, still naive enough to crave genuine connection, felt a momentary surge of hope. but the cold, analytical part of your mind, already scarred by the brutal reality of the harem, remained wary. You scrutinized her movements, her subtle inflections, the way her eyes, despite their warmth, constantly darted around the room, assessing. Was this a genuine overture of friendship in a place where such a thing was a dangerous illusion? Or was it a meticulously crafted ploy to gather information, to gain an advantage, to use your inexperience against you? You tasted the bitter tang of suspicion, even through the sweet words, understanding that even the purest kindness could be a weapon, a carefully disguised maneuver in this merciless game. Then the air in the grand hall seemed to seize, every breath held in collective dread. A young concubine, perhaps emboldened by a fleeting moment of Pharaoh's rumored favor, spoke a word too loudly, a laughter too unrestrained. In a sickeningly slow motion, you watched as a small silver goblet, poised on the edge of her table, toppled, spilling a dark, fragrant wine across the pristine linen. It was a minuscule error, a fleeting, deadly misstep, yet the reaction was immediate and brutal. The queen, whose presence, even in her absence, lingered like a cold shadow, seemed to materialize in the collective intake of breath. Though her throne remained empty, her unseen gaze felt like a physical blow. You saw the subtle, almost imperceptible tensing of a guard's jaw, the immediate chilling stillness of the chief matron. More terrifying still were the small, triumphant smiles, the barely contained gloating in the eyes of other concubines, their own desperate ambitions momentarily sated by another's downfall. In that agonizing second, you understood that a single, seemingly insignificant error could lead not just to disgrace, but to a terrifying absolute downfall, a swift erasure from the game. The exquisite food, once a source of wonder, now tasted like ash in your mouth. The delicate honeyed dates, the tender roasted meats, the sweet, freshly baked bread, all were consumed not for sustenance, but for the performance. You chewed slowly, deliberately, forcing yourself to maintain the facade of appreciative enjoyment, even as your throat felt constricted by a knot of anxiety. You could feel the taste of power in the air, bitter and metallic, mingling with the subtle sweat prickling your hairline, a testament to the constant, exhausting vigilance required. The cloying scent of the perfumes you wore, meant to allure, now felt like a heavy, suffocating mask. This was no longer a meal. It was a grueling test of composure, a forced act of consumption to maintain your image, your fragile place in this intricate, horrifying tableau. Every bite was a forced swallow of truth, every sip a draught of bitter reality. The incident with the young concubine hammered home the stark, undeniable truth. You could not remain a mere ornament. You had to evolve, to adapt, to become a strategist. This was your thirst survival lesson. You observed, with a newfound urgency, the intricate dance of alliances and betrayals, the subtle ways favors were exchanged, the silent signals that passed between the seasoned players. You listened, not just to the words spoken, but to the pregnant pauses, the unspoken implications, the subtle shifts in tone. You analyzed every reaction, every subtle display of emotion, filing it away for future use. You realized, with a chilling clarity that resonated deep within your soul, that you had to learn the rules of this unspoken game, and you had to learn them quickly, or you would become nothing more than a discarded pawn on this relentless chessboard. Your very existence hung in the balance, a precarious tightrope walk above a gaping abyss. As the morning meal finally concluded and the concubines began their stately exit, you looked down at your half-eaten plate of food. But in your mind's eye, it was no longer a simple breakfast. It was a vast, intricate echo of the chessboard, stretching out endlessly before you. Each concubine, a meticulously crafted piece, moved with purpose. Some knights, some bishops, some simply pawns, yet all bound by the unseen hand of the queen. Each polite smile, each whispered word, each fleeting glance, each was a calculated move, a deliberate thrust in a game that never truly ended. You felt a cold certainty settle within you. This was a grand, unending game where there were no true winners, only those who managed to endure, to survive another day, another turn, another move. You were a player now, irrevocably bound to this silent, brutal contest, and this perilous journey had no discernible end. Only continuous generations of players forever engaged in its merciless, beautiful dance. The chill that gripped you wasn't the usual nocturnal dampness of the harem, but a cold that seeped into your very bones, transcending the physical. You were plummeting through a void, not of darkness, but of time itself. A disorienting freefall until you landed, jarringly, in a familiar yet utterly alien world. The silks against your skin felt different, lighter, the scent of the chamber less grand, more raw. You gazed at your reflection in a polished bronze mirror, and a stranger stared back. Younger, perhaps, with eyes still wide with an innocence you'd long since lost, yet undeniably her eyes. You were caught in a displaced dream, not merely observing, but inhabiting the skin of a nascent concubine, a fragile vessel adrift in the tumultuous currents of a bygone era. The air vibrated with a different kind of tension, less rigid, more insidious, a silent hum of nascent rivalries. A sudden, sharp ache in your chest resonated with an unfamiliar fear, her fear. This wasn't just a dream, it was an emotional reincarnation, a visceral journey into the very crucible that forged the woman who now held your destiny in her grasp. You were seeing the old harem through her eyes, feeling the tremors of a past you never knew, yet somehow intrinsically understood. The palace in this forgotten era still pulsed with opulence, but it felt less like a gilded cage and more like a viper's nest veiled in silk. The grand halls, though perhaps less ostentatious, still echoed with the whisper of ambition and the rustle of deceit. The scents were the same, lotus, myrrh, the lingering smell of fear, but their meaning was subtly different, more immediate, less ingrained. You, in her young body, moved through crowded chambers, each face a potential threat or a fleeting, unreliable ally. The competition was palpable, a suffocating pressure that seemed to steal the very breath from your lungs, leaving you perpetually lightheaded with anxiety. Loneliness, a cold, sharp blade pierced through the forced smiles and polite chatter. Every seemingly innocent question felt like an interrogation, every shared laugh a potential trap. You felt the crushing weight of expectation, the silent demand to be perfect, desirable, fertile, a commodity to be consumed, and then perhaps discarded. This was a world where a single misstep could lead to ruin, where youth was a fleeting currency, and a barren womb a death sentence. One particular memory, sharp and vivid, cut through the dream's hazy narrative. You witnessed it through her eyes, standing pressed against a cool stone pillar, inconspicuous. Another concubine, beautiful and once favored, was being quietly escorted from the palace, her face a mask of broken despair, her robes stained with tears and something darker. She had failed to produce a male heir, or perhaps she had simply fallen from grace, replaced by a newer, more vibrant bloom. Pharaoh, a distant, enigmatic figure even then, passed by, his gaze sliding over the weeping woman with chilling indifference, utterly devoid of recognition or empathy. It was in that stark, brutal moment that the young concubine you inhabited understood. This was her moment of realization, a cold, precise awakening to the true, unyielding nature of the game, a truth whispered not in words, but in the heartless dismissal of a life rendered worthless. Her spirit, you felt, had splintered then, the naive girl dying on the spot, giving birth to something harder, more calculating. The harem was not a garden for blossoming, it was a grinder for souls. From that day forward, the strategy was clear, cold, and absolute: survival. Her first, most potent weapon was not charm or beauty, but observation and listening. You felt her become a shadow, a silent sponge, absorbing every whisper, every guarded glance, every discarded rumor. She spent hours hidden behind ornate screens, in secluded gardens, or merely at the edges of gatherings, watching, learning. She meticulously catalogued the strengths and weaknesses of her rivals, the fleeting whims of the pharaoh, the subtle alliances formed and broken like brittle pottery. She didn't rush to act, but moved with the patient precision of a desert predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, gathering secrets like precious jewels. Only the ancient walls know the depths of the countless secrets she painstakingly collected. You felt the immense weight of knowledge she had carried, the silent archive of palace betrayals. Her ears became her eyes, her silence her shield, and her patience her most lethal weapon. The journey to become the woman you now knew was a brutal, self-inflicted amputation. You felt her hardening, piece by painful piece, shedding the softness of youth, the vulnerability of emotion. There were nights, many nights, when tears would stream silently down her face, tears for dreams abandoned, for a love that would never be found, for the innocence that was slowly being burned away. But each tear was swallowed, each sob stifled, for even a moment of visible weakness could be a fatal crack in her carefully constructed armor. You felt the agonizing process of her heart slowly calcifying, turning from flesh to stone, not out of cruelty, but out of absolute necessity. The pain of sacrificing her former self, of relinquishing her innate softness and purity to survive in this unforgiving environment, was an emotional crucible that forged her into the formidable force she would become. It was a slow, agonizing death of self, leaving behind only the steel necessary for survival. Then came the unparalleled pressure, the relentless, suffocating demand for an heir. This was the ultimate lesson of the heir, a biological and political imperative that dwarfed all other concerns. You felt the gnawing anxiety that consumed her, the desperate prayers to the gods for a male child, a son who would secure her position, cement her power, and, more importantly, survive. Every fertile cycle was a torment of hope and dread. Once a son was born, the game merely escalated. The harem, already a den of vipers, became infinitely more dangerous, each concubine a potential threat to her child's delicate life. You understood, viscerally, the desperate, clawing need to protect her offspring from insidious plots, from poisoned food, from hidden daggers wielded by desperate rivals. This intense, primal need to safeguard her legacy, to ensure the continuity of her bloodline, explained the terrifying, absolute ruthlessness you now witnessed in the Queen. Her current reign of terror was not random. It was the consequence of the desperate measures taken to protect her child in a world that sought to devour him. The dream shifted, showcasing her mastery of manipulation. You saw her practicing the art of manipulation and control with chilling precision. One instance, particularly vivid, burned into your mind. She subtly let slip a detail about a rare, exquisite set of lapis lazuli jewelry the pharaoh had recently acquired, knowing that a particularly covetous and vocal rival would immediately demand it. This simple act set off a silent, brutal clash between the rival and another wealthy concubine, one who had received fewer gifts of late, weakening both as they competed for the pharaoh's fleeting attention and resources. Her political chess moves were silent and deadly, a complex dance of power where words were daggers and smiles were shields, each action meticulously calculated for maximum impact. She understood the psychology of the harem, knowing exactly how to exploit fear, ambition, and vulnerability to her own advantage, weaving a web from which few could escape. As the dream spiraled towards its conclusion, you felt the culmination of her arduous journey. The scars of power she carried, etched deep within her soul from years of unrelenting struggle and impossible choices, were not weaknesses, but the very source of her formidable strength. Her authority was not merely inherited, it was forged in the crucible of her own suffering, hardened by fire and purified by sacrifice. The innocence she had lost, the pain she had endured, the ruthlessness she had embraced, all these had transformed her from a vulnerable pawn into the supreme controller, the undisputed ruler of this gilded cage. Her current absolute power was not an innate birthright, but a terrifying masterpiece honed through the fires of adversity and forged by countless ruthless decisions. She was a monument to survival, a living embodiment of the ultimate price paid for dominance.
Suddenly you jolted awake, back in your own bed, in your own time. The memory of the dream, sharp and vivid, clinging to you like a second skin. The morning sun, bright and unforgiving, streamed through your window, but it illuminated a world that felt fundamentally altered. Your perception of the Queen, once a terrifying, two-dimensional figure of absolute authority, had shattered, revealing a complex, deeply scarred woman beneath. You were waking with a different view, not merely of an enemy, but of a product of the very game that now entrapped you. You understood with a profound and chilling clarity that even at the pinnacle of power,
She was not free. She was forever bound by the choices she had made, by the shadow of her brutal past. Her life, a secret buried deep beneath the sands of time, was a testament to survival, a chilling mirror of your own perilous journey. You looked at your hands, and in their trembling you felt the echo of her long-forgotten fears, realizing that in this world, even the victor remained a prisoner. The gilded walls of your harem chamber, once a suffocating prison, seemed to dissolve, replaced by the cool, imposing granite of the inner palace. The sweet, cloying perfume of lotus and myrrh evaporated, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of ink and the dusty scent of ancient papyrus. The soft, whispered gossip of concubines faded into the solemn, weighty silence of the royal chambers. You felt a disorienting shift, as if an invisible hand had turned a colossal hourglass, suddenly placing you on the other side of its falling sands. No longer merely a player, you were now a silent observer, drawn into the very mind of the man who held your destiny and the destiny of an entire empire in his grasp. This was a stark transition from illusion to reality, stripping away the romanticized veil of power to reveal the harsh truths that lay beneath the pharaoh's impenetrable facade. A deep, resonant voice, ancient and weary, seemed to echo in the vastness of your newfound consciousness, guiding your perception, urging you to see beyond the glittering surface, to truly comprehend the crushing weight of the double crown. His mourning, unlike yours, did not begin with the meticulous application of kohl or the careful draping of silk. Instead, a solemn procession of scribes and viziers entered the royal antechamber, their faces etched with the solemnity of their tidings. The air, devoid of harem perfumes, was thick with the earthy scent of freshly unrolled papyrus scrolls and the sharp, almost acrid smell of the black ink used to record the daily travails of a nation. A different morning unfolded before your newly acquired perspective. Not one of beauty rituals, but of raw, unvarnished responsibility. You heard reports of the Nile's unpredictable flood levels, threatening either devastating drought or catastrophic deluge. Tales of famine in the distant southern provinces mingled with urgent dispatches from the eastern borders, detailing encroaching nomadic tribes and the ever-present shadow of war. Each piece of news, delivered in a clipped, formal tone, carried the weight of countless lives, a crushing burden that you now felt acutely within his very thoughts.
The pharaoh was not simply a king. He was a living god, the terrestrial embodiment of Ra himself, tasked with maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order and justice across the entire land of Egypt. You felt the immense, almost unbearable burden of the living God, the chilling isolation that came with being worshipped, yet utterly alone. The golden aura that seemed to emanate from him, seen from afar, was not a symbol of boundless freedom, but a cage of divine responsibility, forged from the very expectations of his people and the ancient gods. Every step, every word, every decision was fraught with sacred significance, a ritual act to ensure the sun's rising, the Nile's bounty, the nation's prosperity. His throne was not a seat of leisure, but an altar of endless sacrifice, where personal desire was immolated for the greater good of an empire,
a profound and terrifying loneliness. You witnessed a scene unfold, sharp and poignant, as Pharaoh grappled with a life-and-death decision. A general, his armor still bearing the dust of the frontier, presented two scrolls, one detailing a punitive campaign against rebellious Nubian tribes, promising swift, brutal victory. The other, a diplomatic overture, risking perceived weakness, but offering a chance for fragile peace. You felt the agonizing calculus in his mind, the lives of his soldiers, the stability of the borders, the reputation of Egypt. His hand, heavy with the rings of office, hovered over the scrolls, each inscribed word carrying the weight of thousands of souls. His eyes, from this intimate vantage point, were no longer the detached, indifferent pools you knew. Instead, they held a profound weariness, a deep-seated anxiety that seemed to seep from the very depths of his ancient lineage. There was no indifference here, only the crushing weight of consequence, a solitary anguish that bespoke the true cost of supreme power. Even a pharaoh, a god on earth, was not truly free. You felt the constant, insidious pressure from priests and advisors, a web of influence that sought to guide and sometimes manipulate his divine will. The high priests of Amun, their faces severe and their voices steeped in ancient wisdom, presented their omens, their interpretations of divine will, often aligning conveniently with their own vast power and land holdings. Ancient noble families, their lineages tracing back to the very dawn of unified Egypt, offered counsel laden with generational grievances and subtle power plays. Ambitious viziers, their eyes sharp and their smiles practiced, presented solutions that often served their own rising influence within the court. Every piece of advice was a hidden political maneuver, a calculated chess move on a grander board, and he had to navigate this treacherous landscape with surgical precision to ensure his absolute power remained unblemished. His strength was in his ability to discern the genuine from the self-serving, the loyal from the ambitious. His own personal life, you realized, was similarly constrained. His political marriages, including his union with the Queen, were not born of the tender affections of the heart, but forged in the cold, unyielding fires of statecraft. Each union was a strategic alliance, a carefully negotiated pact to consolidate power, to secure vital trade routes, or to ensure the purity of his divine bloodline. You felt the distant echo of a youthful longing, perhaps for a simpler connection, a genuine companionship. But such desires were luxuries that could not be afforded by a living God. Even the most profound personal feelings were sacrificed on the altar of the crown, immolated for the stability of the two lands, a chilling testament to the price of rulership. His children were not just offspring, they were living prophecies, ensuring the continuity of the divine lineage, their very existence a matter of national security.
From this new perspective, you understood the pharaoh's distant relationship with the harem. It was a mere whisper against the roar of his responsibilities, a fleeting distraction rather than a focal point of his existence. The fading of the harem in his mind was almost absolute. The concubines, for whom his mere glance was the sun, were to him largely an administrative detail, a necessary appendage of his divine status, a means to ensure a plentiful lineage. Sometimes he would seek brief solace in their company, a moment of fleeting beauty or song to quiet the clamor of his duties. But even then, they were a potential source of intrigue, a breeding ground for ambitious schemes that could, however subtly, undermine his rule. He was not consumed by the obsession of choosing, as they were consumed by the obsession of being chosen. His gaze was fixed on horizons far grander, far more dangerous. A profound, almost palpable anxiety emanated from him, a fear far greater than any physical threat. This was his obsession with legacy, the relentless burden of historical judgment. Would he be remembered as a true son of Ra, a pharaoh who brought prosperity and victory? Or would he merely be a forgotten name, a footnote in the vast annals of Egyptian history? He saw the towering monuments of his ancestors, felt the weight of their achievements, and knew that his every action would be judged by the silent, unyielding gaze of eternity. The fear of being deemed a failure, of failing Ma'at, of letting down the gods and his people, weighed on him far more heavily than any fleeting desire for physical pleasure or personal comfort. It was a constant, gnawing anxiety, a silent demand to be more, to achieve more, to secure his place among the truly great, an eternal weight upon his shoulders.
In a fleeting, unguarded moment, as the vast, star-dusted Egyptian night stretched beyond his palace window, you felt a deep, almost painful longing within him. It was a dream of another life, a fleeting image of simple existence, the cool touch of river water on his skin, the warmth of a hearth in a humble dwelling, the simple joy of a meal shared without the crushing weight of a crown. For a heartbeat, he allowed himself to imagine a life free from the endless reports, the political machinations, the divine responsibilities. But the illusion was transient, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. He knew, with the cold certainty of his destiny, that such dreams were illusions, fragile constructs of a life he could never possess, forever bound to the colossal, relentless current of Egypt. The perspective shifted once more, leaving you back in your own body, but forever altered. You lay in your bed, the harem's familiar scents and sounds returning, yet imbued with a new, profound understanding. Pharaoh sat, in your mind's eye, alone in his vast chambers, the golden light of the lamps illuminating only his solitude. The throne, the heavy crown, the absolute power, none of it brought freedom or happiness. Instead, it was a different kind of cage, one forged from the very fabric of responsibility and isolation. His was the ultimate solitude at the apex, the chilling realization that he too was a player, perhaps the most burdened of all, caught in the grander, merciless game of fate and national duty. You were not so different after all, each trapped within your own gilded prison, merely serving different purposes in the vast, unending drama of Egypt. The opulent, perfumed air of the main harem quarters suddenly felt thin, almost suffocating, as you found yourself taking a wrong turn, drawn by a faint, unfamiliar murmur from beyond a nondescript, carved wooden door.
It led not to another gilded corridor or a perfumed chamber, but down a narrow, dimly lit stone staircase, smelling faintly of sweat, stale cooking oil, and the sharp tang of ancient dust. The hushed, elegant whispers of the concubines faded, replaced by the clatter of earthenware pots, the rhythmic thud of laundresses beating linen, and the low guttural curses of unseen laborers. You had stumbled, stepping backstage, into the hidden arteries of the palace, a labyrinth of unseen labor that powered the grand illusion above. The air here was thick with a raw, earthy reality, a stark, visceral juxtaposition to the delicate beauty and ruthless ambition that defined your daily existence. Your heart, accustomed to the subtle dangers of the visible court, now pounded with a different kind of apprehension, for this was a world where secrets were not whispered, but lived, breathed, and meticulously guarded by unseen hands. Your path led you past a small, unassuming antechamber, where the first of these silent architects of the palace's power structure stood, a eunuch. His face, smooth and unlined, was a mask of perpetual neutrality. His eyes, however, were ancient and knowing, missing nothing. He was an embodiment of the eunuch, the queen's eyes and ears, a living conduit of information, a nerve ending of the queen's vast, insidious intelligence network. You felt a shiver run down your spine, not of fear, but of profound understanding. These men, surgically altered and stripped of their masculinity, were not merely servants. They were ghost-like figures, moving unseen, unheard, yet witnessing every transgression, every secret tryst, every political whisper. The coldness radiating from him was a shield, a testament to years of unwavering loyalty, but beneath it you sensed a vast, hidden reservoir of knowledge, secrets that could unravel empires. They knew, with terrifying certainty, who truly held power, who plotted in the shadows, who was destined to rise, and who was doomed to fall. Further along, in a sun-dappled courtyard where heaps of linen lay drying, you encountered the attendants, anonymous lives. These were the palace's countless female servants, their faces smeared with dust and fatigue, their hands calloused from endless toil. Their lives were a relentless cycle of fetching, cleaning, serving, a testament to a tireless, voiceless existence. They wore simple, undyed linen, and their presence was as ephemeral as the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Yet, as you paused, unseen behind a towering stack of baskets, you heard a low, almost inaudible murmur. Two young girls, their heads bowed low over their mending, exchanged a fleeting, terrified glance. One sighed, a sound heavy with unspoken burdens, a quiet lament for a life unlived. Their anonymous existence was a gilded cage of its own, but from their voiceless vantage point they were privy to every hushed quarrel, every secret rendezvous, every hidden despair, all the countless narratives buried deep beneath the sands of time in the very walls of this treacherous palace. In a dimly lit chamber, redolent with the sharp scent of herbs and ancient remedies, you found the physicians, keepers of life, bearers of secrets. A gaunt man with wise, weirdy eyes bent over a pestle, grinding herbs with practiced ease. His hands, though gentle, had likely touched the most sacred and vulnerable parts of the royal family. He was not just a healer, he was a silent confidant, a silent repository of the royal family's deepest vulnerabilities. He knew the hidden illnesses that ravaged royal bodies, the insidious symptoms of poison administered by unseen hands, the quiet despair that led to barren wombs, and the fragility of sickly newborn princes. His knowledge was a dangerous burden, a constant tightrope walk between healing and revealing, his Hippocratic oath perpetually tested by the ruthless currents of palace intrigue. The secrets he held were not of state, but of flesh and blood, equally potent, equally perilous.
You then stumbled upon a workshop, vibrant with the sparkle of precious stones and the shimmer of delicate fabrics. Here the artisans, creators of beauty, concealers of truth, toiled in silent dedication. A jeweler, his eyes magnified by a lens, meticulously set tiny garnets into a golden serpent bracelet. Nearby, seamstresses, their fingers nimble, embroidered the intricate patterns on a concubine's ceremonial robe. These were the hands that wove the illusion, that created the dazzling facade that masked the brutal reality of palace life. Yet as the jeweler held up his finished piece, a tremor ran through his calloused hand, not of exhaustion, but of something deeper. Fear, perhaps, or the weight of a secret glimpsed from a casual conversation. The exquisite duty they crafted served as both a distraction and a shroud, designed to blind outsiders to the ruthlessness and despair that festered beneath the surface of the gilded court, their trembling hands betraying deeper truths. As you moved deeper into the labyrinthine service passages, you caught glimpses of stolen moments, hushed exchanges that hinted at a parallel world of silent strategizing. In a narrow, rarely used empty corridor, two scullery maids leaned against a cool stone wall, their voices barely audible. You overheard a fragment of a conversation about a sudden change in the Queen's schedule, a detail too mundane for concubines, yet potentially vital for those who moved beneath the surface. A swift, meaningful glance passed between a eunuch and a high-ranking female attendant, an unspoken agreement that spoke volumes of shared knowledge, of alliances forged in the shadows. These were the rare, fleeting instances where their carefully constructed masks slipped, revealing moments of weariness, of defiance, or of their own quiet calculations, a secret language known only to them. These were their own chess moves, small, intricate maneuvers to secure their own positions, to navigate the perilous currents of palace life. You began to perceive a subtle, intricate web connecting these seemingly disparate individuals. The connections among silent players were not formal alliances, but a sprawling, organic network of shared information, whispered warnings, and quiet favors. A laundry worker might overhear a significant conversation and relay it to a kitchen maid, who in turn might pass it to a trusted eunuch. They helped each other, not out of altruism, but out of a shared understanding of their precarious existence, a collective instinct for survival. Their goals, though humble compared to the concubines' grand ambitions, were no less fiercely pursued. The safety of their families, a slight advancement in their meager status, or simply the ability to exist another day without drawing the notice of the powerful. They were the hidden roots of the palace, intertwining and supporting each other, a testament to the resilience of those living on the fringes of power, their quiet desires fueling their own personal games. The weight of their shared burden, the price of their unseen service, became palpable. These were not physical wounds, but their invisible scars, deep fissures etched into their souls. You felt the profound weariness born from years of witnessing unspeakable cruelties, of being complicit in secrets that could shatter lives. The constant gnawing fear of reprisal, of being caught in the crossfire of royal intrigues, had left them perpetually on edge, their eyes always darting, their movements always guarded. They were survivors, yes, but their survival came at a steep cost. The erosion of their innocence, the hardening of their spirits. You felt a strange, profound empathy for them, a silent recognition of their shared humanity in the face of an inhuman system. Understanding that their pain, though less visible, was no less potent than your own. As you continued your silent journey through these hidden passages, observing, learning, you realized a chilling truth. You are also a part of them. Despite your more elevated position as a concubine, you were inextricably linked to this hidden ecosystem. You too were a cog in the colossal, indifferent machine of the palace, your existence, your very survival, dependent on its intricate, often brutal operation. The beauty rituals, the waiting, the silent competition, these were merely the visible gears. The true power, the true lifeblood of the palace, flowed through these hidden corridors, through the hands and eyes and hushed whispers of these silent players. Your fate, like theirs, was interwoven with the threads of secrecy and surveillance, making you a vital yet equally vulnerable component in this grand, unforgiving mechanism. As you eventually found your way back to the familiar opulent corridors, the realization settled over you like a shroud. You looked around at the shimmering silks, the gleaming gold, the seemingly impenetrable walls, and understood. Walls have ears, sands have eyes. In this palace, nothing was truly private. Every soft murmur, every fleeting glance, every seemingly insignificant movement could be observed, recorded, analyzed by one of these countless unseen players. A secret, buried deep beneath the sands of time or within the most guarded chamber, could be unearthed at any moment, by any hand, for any purpose. The collective presence of these silent observers transformed the entire palace into a single, colossal, all-seeing eye, a living, breathing entity of surveillance, ensuring that no game was ever truly unwatched, and no secret ever truly safe. The relentless cycle began anew, each dawn a carbon copy of the one before, a cruel joke played by the merciless sun. The first rays of light, once a promise of a new beginning, now merely signaled the commencement of another identical day, another meticulously choreographed performance. The rising bell,
A crisp chime that once woke you from dream-filled slumber was now a shrill command, pulling you from the shallow, restless sleep of exhaustion. Every morning, the same ritualistic bathing, the same meticulous oiling of skin, the same arduous braiding of hair. Every afternoon, the same lessons in comportment, the same tedious memorization of ancient verses. Every evening, the same preparation for a pharaoh who rarely, if ever, appeared. Repetition until exhaustion became the very rhythm of your existence, each day a near-perfect replica of the last, blurring time into an indistinguishable, suffocating continuum. You felt yourself becoming a clockwork doll, pulled by unseen strings, performing lifeless, practiced motions, your individual spirit slowly, inexorably eroding with each passing identical hour. Meals, once simple sustenance, transformed into clinical observations, a part of the grand production line. You sat at low tables, not to savor the delicate flavors of honeyed figs or tender roasted quail, but to be assessed. Invisible eyes seemed to scrutinize every movement of your fork, every sip from your cup. Overseers, their expressions impassive, occasionally made silent notes on small papyrus scrolls, their gazes like cold probes, dissecting your very being. Graded meals became a daily test, the food itself a controlled substance, meticulously portioned to maintain the desired physique, to ensure the optimal glow of your skin. A tool in the hands of your sculptors, not a balm for your gnawing hunger or a comfort for your shrinking spirit. It was a stark reminder that your body was not yours, but a vessel to be honed, optimized, and maintained for a singular external purpose. Its nourishment a means to an end, rather than an act of self-care. The hours spent in the grand practice halls were not lessons in grace, but relentless, agonizing rehearsals in deception. This was your drama class, where every natural instinct was systematically dismantled and replaced with a carefully constructed performance. You learned to walk with a practiced gliding stride, as if floating on air, each movement meticulously measured to convey an ethereal beauty. Your laughter, once spontaneous and genuine, was now a cultivated melody, a series of soft, musical trills designed to enchant, devoid of true mirth. Even the angle of your head, the tilt of your chin, the subtle narrowing of your eyes, all were rehearsed countless times before polished bronze mirrors until the spontaneity was purged, replaced by a calculated, flawless presentation. Each meticulously practiced gesture, every artfully manufactured smile became a calculated performance, a chilling betrayal of your authentic self, reducing you to a mere echo of what you once were.
The most insidious part of this process wasn't the physical pain, but the slow, relentless erosion of your mind, orchestrated by the seemingly benign psychological manipulation from specialists. These were not just instructors in etiquette, they were sculptors of the soul, their words veiled in honeyed tones, yet carrying the sharpness of a surgeon's scalpel. They whispered tales of concubines who had risen to unimaginable favor, basking in the pharaoh's light, their lives transformed into dazzling constellations. Then, in the next breath, they recounted chilling stories of those who had failed, cast aside like withered flowers, forgotten in the vast, unforgiving desert of the harem.
They meticulously wove a web of desire for favor and profound fear of oblivion, sowing these insidious seeds deep within your consciousness, twisting your very perception of self-worth. They didn't just bend your body, they warped your mind, ensuring your compliance, your yearning for a master who might not even acknowledge your existence. Your body, once a source of comfort and familiarity, became an alien landscape, a body as an empty canvas. Hours were spent on meticulous skin treatments, massages with rare aromatic oils that left your skin unnaturally smooth and glistening. Your hair was painstakingly washed, conditioned, and styled, adorned with glittering gold pins and fragrant blossoms. Your nails were buffed to a high sheen, painted with delicate designs. Every part of you was subjected to an unrelenting scrutiny, then polished, painted, and adorned to fit a predetermined ideal, a blank slate awaiting inscription. The process was one of creation, yet it felt like a profound erasure. Language itself became a tightly controlled weapon, wielded with surgical precision. This was your license to speak, a rigid set of rules dictating every utterance. You were taught which words were elegant, which phrases hinted at vulgarity, which expressions might displease. Every potential conversation was mentally rehearsed, every facial expression meticulously calibrated to convey only what was deemed appropriate, a serene politeness, a demure fascination, a subtle adoration. Spontaneity was a dangerous luxury. Every spoken word was weighed, measured, and rehearsed, reducing your speech to the mechanical repetition of a parrot, carefully trained to avoid error or the slightest hint of displeasure from those in power. To speak freely was to risk everything, so you learned to internalize the silence, to choose your words with a terrifying exactitude, for even an innocent misstep could have devastating consequences. Even within this shared crucible of transformation, the pervasive competitive pressure in the process thrived, a constant undercurrent of unspoken rivalry. As you endured the endless hours of training, your eyes and the eyes of the other concubines would constantly dart, assessing, comparing. A slightly clumsier movement from another woman, a single misplaced word, or a less than perfect posture would be met with a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk, a glint of satisfied contempt. You felt the silent comparison, the unvoiced judgment in their gazes, and knew your own movements were being similarly scrutinized. The subtle, pervasive envy, the almost imperceptible hint of scorn when another failed to meet the impossible standards, served to amplify the relentless pressure, transforming every shared space into a quiet arena of silent, brutal contestation. The constant, merciless scrutiny ignited a terrifying obsession with flaws. You began to see imperfections where none had existed before. A tiny, barely visible mole on your wrist, a faint line around your eyes, a slight curve in your nose that deviated from the idealized profile etched into your mind. Every perceived imperfection became a monstrous defect, magnified by the relentless pressure to achieve an impossible perfection. The fear of being discarded, of being deemed unworthy for some infinitesimal blemish, gnawed at your subconscious, transforming you into your own harshest judge, an extreme self-scrutinizer. This internal terror, a silent, relentless siege, consumed your thoughts, relentlessly seeking out and amplifying every imagined inadequacy, twisting your perception of your own body into a grotesque landscape of defects. Slowly, insidiously, your very inner voice became distorted. The rebellious thoughts, the defiant whispers of your former self began to fade, replaced by the cold, calculating logic of the harem. Instead of asking what you wanted, you began to think in terms of what they desired, what Pharaoh might approve. Your innate self-confidence, once a stubborn ember, was systematically eroded, replaced by a profound dependence on external validation, particularly from the distant, elusive God-King. They say that became your own internal refrain, your thoughts mimicking the chillingly objective language of your trainers, speaking to yourself with a detached, almost clinical assessment, stripping away your unique individuality. You were becoming a reflection, an echo of their desires, your true self dissolving into the collective mold of the perfect concubine. At the end of another grueling day, you stood before the polished bronze mirror, a radiant, almost alien figure. Your skin gleamed with oils. Your hair was a carefully constructed edifice. Your robes flowed with an exquisite grace. You were, by all outward appearances, a perfect product in a glass cage. Yet, as you gazed into your reflection, you saw not a woman, but an exquisitely crafted facade, a beautiful, empty shell designed to fulfill another's desire. The eyes that stared back were perfect, yet devoid of the vibrant spark that had once defined you. The profound, aching pain of this dehumanization seeped into your soul, a chilling, unspoken secret buried deep beneath the flawless veneer, a silent testament to the monstrous cost of such manufactured perfection. You were a masterpiece of their design and a victim of their process, utterly flawless, utterly broken. The air in the lotus garden, usually a sanctuary of cultivated tranquility, vibrated with an unnatural hum. You were tracing the delicate veins of a wilting lily, lost in thought, when it reached you, a whisper, softer than the rustle of a papyrus reed, yet sharper than a serpent's fang. It came from behind a meticulously clipped hedge. Two voices, barely audible, yet the words, fragmented and veiled, pierced the morning's calm. The scar on her thigh, Pharaoh's disappointment. A cold knot formed in your stomach. No names were spoken, no specific accusations made, but the implication hung in the air, thick and venomous. This opening with a whisper was not merely idle chatter. It was a tiny, unseen butterfly, fluttering its wings, unknowingly preparing to unleash a hurricane of ruin within these gilded walls. Your curiosity, once a gentle inquiry, morphed into a gnawing anxiety, a terrifying premonition that this ethereal sound held the power to shatter a life, a truth now irrevocably intertwined with your very survival. You had always known the palace walls had ears, but now you understood they also had tongues. The walls have ears network was not a metaphorical concept. It was a living, breathing entity. Information, raw and volatile, flowed through unseen channels. It was carried by the quiet shuffle of a young maid, tidy in cushions, her eyes darting, taking in a discarded love token. It whispered through the polished halls by the unblinking gaze of eunuchs, who saw everything and spoke nothing, yet conveyed volumes through their impassive faces. It even drifted in from beyond the palace gates, carried by the garrulous street vendors, whose innocent chatter inadvertently revealed details of noble families picked up by the market-going attendants. You realized with a chilling clarity that absolute secrecy was a myth, and every seemingly innocuous piece of information, no matter how small or mundane, was a potential weapon ripe for exploitation by unseen hands. The very air you breathed was charged with unspoken narratives, waiting for the opportune moment to be twisted, amplified, and unleashed. You watched with a grim fascination as other concubines played this perilous game, their movements as precise and deadly as a cobra's strike. You observed a subtle nod, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile exchanged between two rivals, a silent agreement to undermine a third. One concubine with an innocent sigh might lament the extravagant spending habits of a rival, knowing full well the information would reach the ears of a fiscally prudent vizier. Another might recount a seemingly harmless anecdote about a rival's family history, carefully inserting a detail that hinted at a less than noble lineage, a subtle poison designed to erode the rival's standing in Pharaoh's eyes. You saw them observing others playing chess, meticulously placing their verbal pieces, each veiled remark, each feigned concern, a brutal move cloaked in elegance, a chilling demonstration of how ruthlessness could be veiled by the most exquisite manners. The veneer of civility was thin, brittle, easily shattered by the venom of a well-placed rumor. Then the game turned on you. A carelessly uttered remark, a moment of unguarded frustration shared with a seemingly sympathetic attendant, was twisted, magnified, and released into the palace's bloodstream. The next day, you felt the cold stares, the hushed whispers that followed you like a phantom. Rumors of your discontent, of your alleged disrespect for ancient traditions, spread like wildfire. Pharaoh's glance, when it fell upon you, was colder, more distant than usual. This was the price of innocence, a brutal awakening to the destructive power of this unseen currency. Your simple words, devoid of malice, had been meticulously reshaped into a weapon, aimed squarely at your burgeoning, fragile existence within these walls. The consequence, though not immediately physical, was a chilling isolation, a sudden drop in status that left you gasping for air in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Under the suffocating pressure of survival, you began to shed the last vestiges of your former self. You no longer merely observed, you actively began to collect the currency. Your ears became finely tuned instruments, straining to catch every whispered conversation, every rustle of silk that might signify a clandestine meeting. Your eyes learned to decipher the silent language of glances, the subtle shifts in posture that betrayed hidden emotions. You scoured discarded papyrus fragments, piecing together fragments of information like a desperate archaeologist unearthing ancient truths. You sought out the peripheral players, the quiet scribes, the disgruntled guards, even the seemingly simple kitchen staff, knowing they often held pieces of the puzzle. This dangerous pursuit of knowledge felt like navigating a treacherous labyrinth of lies, each step fraught with the peril of exposure, yet knowing that without this currency you were utterly defenseless, adrift in a sea of unknown threats. As the rumors swirled and twisted, you noticed a strange, almost visceral sensation, a particular scent of rumor that seemed to permeate the very air of the palace. It was a noxious blend. The cloying sweetness of the concubine's perfumes, now laced with the acrid undertone of anxious sweat. It mingled with the damp, earthy smell of the hidden, forgotten corners where plots were often hatched, and the faint, lingering scent of burnt incense, perhaps from prayers for protection or curses against rivals. Sometimes you swore you could smell the metallic tang of fear itself, clinging to the heavy drapes and polished stone. This unseen miasma, a testament to the palace's festering underbelly, was the true aroma of deceit, an invisible shroud woven from whispered lies and unspoken desires, an oppressive presence that filled every breath. The day came when you held a piece of information so potent, so volatile, it felt like a burning coal in your hand. It was a secret about a rival, a truth that could utterly shatter her carefully constructed facade, sending her plummeting from favor. The decision, stark and brutal, clawed at your conscience. Could you trade conscience for survival? Could you, the girl who once dreamed of innocence, now wield such a destructive weapon? Your mind became a battleground, purity warring with pragmatism. The image of the other concubine, her face etched with despair as she was led away, flashed before your eyes. The memory of your own humiliation, the sting of the baseless whispers, hardened your resolve. This agonizing internal struggle pitted the fragile remnants of your moral compass against the stark, brutal demands of self-preservation, forcing you to choose between the light of innocence and the deep, unforgiving shadows of the game. The chilling effectiveness of this currency was hammered home by the terrifying consequences of rumor you witnessed. A favored concubine, once radiant in the pharaoh's light, became the target of a meticulously crafted smear campaign. Whispers of her alleged infidelity, of her secret dealings with foreign merchants, spread like a plague. Her laughter, once vibrant, became strained, her eyes, once sparkling, dulled with fear. Then came the cold, indifferent gaze of the pharaoh, followed by the silent, chilling summons from the queen's chambers. The next morning she was simply gone. Her disappearance, unexplained and unmourned, was a stark, brutal lesson. It underlined the chilling truth that a rumor was not merely idle talk, but a lethal weapon, capable of inflicting more devastation than any blade, its unseen wounds leading to a silent, irreversible demise, a grim reminder of its power. You began to comprehend that even Pharaoh and the Queen, the ultimate arbiters of power, were deeply entangled in this very same game, but on a grander, more sophisticated scale. Truth distorted was their greatest tool. Pharaoh might subtly encourage whispers about a rival nation's weakness to justify a military campaign. The queen might meticulously craft a narrative of a concubine's disloyalty, not out of personal hatred, but to test loyalty, to consolidate her own power, or to conceal a far greater, more dangerous secret of state. You realized with a chilling clarity that absolute truth held no inherent value in this palace, only what was believed to be true. Only the carefully constructed narrative held any sway. The game transcended personal rivalries, becoming a complex dance of statecraft and control, where reality was merely a malleable substance. The weight of this knowledge settled upon you, a heavy, suffocating blanket. The palace, once a place of dazzling luxury, was now revealed as an endless, shifting battlefield where the game had no boundaries. The lines between truth and lie, between friend and foe, had completely blurred, merging into an indistinguishable, treacherous landscape. You were no longer just a concubine. You were a seasoned survivor, living in a world where information was the sole, fluctuating currency, and every secret, every whisper held immeasurable value. A secret once buried deep beneath the sands of time or locked within the deepest chambers of the heart could be exhumed at any moment by any player for any purpose, and you had to master the brutal art of either digging them up or burying them even deeper, to ensure your perilous continuance in this relentless, ceaseless game.
As twilight deepened, a profound quiet settled. You lay on silken sheets, feeling the day's tension uncoil. Lingering perfumes mingled with night jasmine, a gentle descent into slumber. This was the release of night, a quiet surrender to repose, even as the palace's currents flowed. Your body rested, but your mind drifted. Sleep claimed you. The first dream bloomed, a warm return. You stood under your childhood sky, dust between your toes, laughter by the Nile. Scent of earth and wheat filled your lungs, pure and untainted. This was a profound dream of stolen freedom, a visceral re-experience of a life unmarred. You chased a goat, your laughter free, a tantalizing glimpse of joy, yet a fleeting illusion. The dream shifted, twisting. You sat on a gleaming golden throne, faces blurring below. A heavy crown pressed your brow, your voice command. This was a chilling dream of illusory power, a deceptive mirage of control. Yet vast emptiness echoed. Authority felt a crushing burden, loneliness a sharp blade. No joy, only a hollow void. Then they emerged, the appearance of ghosts, translucent figures, eyes holding echoes of past terrors. The vanished concubine, a silent accusation. The frail child, tinged with sorrow. Most haunting, your innocent past self, a stark mirror. These were spectral remnants of the game's casualties, reminding you of its exorbitant price and a secret buried deep. The dream turned nightmare, a chilling reenactment, a vicious cycle of preparation. You are back in the grand hall, endlessly repeating movements. The gliding walk, the practiced smile, meticulous kohl, ritualistic oiling, tedious memorization, an endless loop. Trainers' scrutinizing gazes haunted your subconscious. Even in your mind, you couldn't escape the production process, trapped in the dehumanizing pursuit of an ideal. Then the voice, disembodied, vast, ancient, the voice of the game. It boomed, "This game never ends. You are a pawn, a transient player in an eternal dance. Rules are absolute, stakes unforgiving, your role fleeting." The words resonated, stripping all hope, impressing the play's vast, indifferent scale. A glimmer of light. You woke gently, but the dream's intensity clung. As its fragile tapestry dissolved, you recognized the cruel awakening moment. Dawn's rays brought no warmth,
only illuminated the suffocating grandeur. Hope evaporated, replaced by harsh reality. The palace materialized around you, each detail a stark reminder of your inescapable reality, an end to fantasy. Without conscious thought, your body began its practiced routine, a series of repetitive actions. You rose, moved with trained grace, selected robes, applied kohl, arranged hair, each movement automatic, devoid of will. No fight left, only weary acceptance. You had merged into the loop, a perfect cog. Your morning rituals were a silent testament to assimilation, a chilling surrender to the palace's demands. You walked to the polished bronze mirror. The reflection was yours, yet altered. The girl from the wheat fields was gone, replaced by a woman hardened by shadows, eyes knowing, lips set in endurance. This was a different view of victory, a chilling realization. Surviving brought no freedom, no happiness, only continued burdens, invisible scars, loss of self. Winning meant only earning the right to continue playing a game that consumed everything. The first bell chimed, a crushing thought settled. This palace game, this unending game, would never end. Players would change, rules grow ruthless, but the loop of power, competition, twisted dreams would flow on, eternal like the Nile. You were a player, one in a countless lineage, and the game had no finish line, only endless generations taking their turn. The sun rose, painting the sky gold, a deceptive promise, as the game began anew. And so our journey through the ancient Egyptian harem comes to a close. Thank you for accompanying us through these dramatic narratives, hidden palace secrets, and harsh destinies. We hope this story has offered you moments of profound reflection and introspection. Don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts, hit like if you enjoyed this content, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next captivating historical explorations.